Hi, welcome to Budget MTG Decks. All magic fun, all cards under $1. I'm David, and today we're going to be evaluating and reviewing the 2018 Commander pre-constructed deck, Exquisite Invention. Now, we're going to be looking at every single card in the deck and having a look at whether it's good or a bad fit for this deck. And we're also going to be giving you upgrade suggestions totaling no more than $25. So let's have a look at the Commander. We have Saheeli the Gifted for 2, a blue and a red. So for 4 mana, we get a 4 loyalty planeswalker. Her +1 is create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. Her +1, the second one, is the next spell you cast this turn costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control as you cast it. So it's a nice discount. And the -7, also known as the ultimate, is for each artifact you control, create a token that's a copy of it. Those tokens gain haste, exile those tokens at the beginning of the next end step, and of course, Saheeli the Gifted can be your commander, because normally planeswalkers cannot be your commander. So already the role of this commander is quite clear. We see that this commander cares about artifacts, and it is going to be an artifact heavy deck. So what are going to be the cards that we're going to be needing, or in the case that we're going to have in this deck? We're going to have 1 commander, 20 artifacts, that's quite a lot, 19 removal spells, 17 advantage spells, 15 ramp, so a lot of ramp in the deck as well, and 38 lands. So let's have a look at the artifacts first. We divided the artifacts into 2 different categories, and that is those that produce tokens and some fatties. We're going to start out with the ones that produce tokens, and the first card, and this is a new exclusive card for this product, and that is Retrofitter Foundry. For a single mana, it's an artifact, and for 3 mana, we can untap this card. For 2 mana and tapping it, we can create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token, and for 1 mana and tapping it, we can sacrifice a servo, create a colorless Thopter token with flying. And finally, just tapping it and sacrificing a Thopter, we can create a 4/4 colorless construct artifact creature token. That's a pretty interesting card. It fits relatively well with the deck thematically. And it's cool how there's a lot of cards in this deck that actually do create Thopter, so there's an easy way to create 4/4 colorless constructs. But the question is this really what we want to be doing? And fun card as though it is, we have actually found a card that we would rather have in here. So we've got starting it off right away with an upgrade card, and this upgrade card, so the card is going to be replacing Retrofitter Foundry in this deck, is Trading Post. For 4 mana, it's also an artifact. For 1 mana, tapping it and discarding a card we gain for life. Not a great ability, we're not going to be using it for that. For 1 mana, tapping it, paying a life, we create a 0/1 white goat creature token. It's a chump blocker. For 1 and tapping it, and sacrificing a creature, we can return target artifact card from our graveyard to our hand. So that's cool. That's recursion for artifacts. And finally, for 1 and tapping it and sacrificing an artifact, we're going to be drawing a card. Now, you may think, wait a second, Trading Post is a little bit more expensive, and the first ability isn't that great. But the reason why we think this is actually a great upgrade card is because of the versatility. Now, the Retrofitter Foundry is really focusing a lot on getting those servos, getting those Thopters, but Trading Post doesn't really care about that. Trading Post mostly cares about having artifacts, having creature artifacts, and being able to use those to get the maximum value out of that. And I would argue that being able to get drawing a card every single turn by sacrificing those artifacts is more value than getting that 4/4, because after all, the cards are usually more powerful than that, and it doesn't require us to have a basis of either Thopter or servos. Just any artifacts will do fine. Also, because there's a lot of cards in this deck that would like to be sacrificed, so Trading Post allows us to sacrifice those artifacts even though they're not servos or Thopters, which Retrofitter Foundry does require. Okay, moving on to the next card, and that is a Loyal Apprentice for 1 and a red. It's a 1/2 Human Artificer with haste. And it also has Lieutenant, which means that if we control our commander at the beginning of combat, we're going to be creating a 1/1 Thopter creature token that also gains haste until the end of turn. It's a fine little card, create little Thopters, and it comes in really early, so it's a nice little chaff for sacrificing later. Thopter Engineer is next for 2 and a red. It's a 1/3 human artificer. When it enters the battlefield, we're going to create a 1/1 colorless Thopter creature token with flying. So this gives us another one of the little artifacts. And additionally, artifact creatures you control have haste. So this one actually would have been worse than the other one because the other one gives us a Thopter every single turn as long as we control our commander. Thopter Engineer only gives us a Thopter one time, but the reason why we left it in, we didn't upgrade it, is because it gives all our artifact creatures haste, which is actually really nice. Mimic Vat is up next for 3 mana. It's an artifact with imprints that states that whenever a non-token creature is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you may exile that card. If you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic Vat to its owner's graveyard. So every time that a non-token creature of anybody is put into the graveyard, we can actually like switch it out and say, okay, now it's going to be this one. So what are we going to do with that exiled card? Well, for 3 mana and tapping it, we can put a token on the battlefield that's a copy of the exiled card. It gains haste, and we're going to exile at the beginning of the next end step. So every time we're going to be able to get whatever is the best creature that just died, pop it on the battlefield, attack with it, then it's going to die. Maybe it's got some kind of dying trigger, or maybe we can sacrifice it to something else before it dies. Very, very nice. Then we have a Prototype Portal for 4 mana. It's also an artifact, also with imprint. It states that whenever Prototype Portal enters the battlefield, we're going to exile an artifact card from our hand. So now it's not about the stuff, the creatures that die, non-token creatures that die. Now it's about artifacts in our hand. So we're going to exile that. And then for X and tapping, we're going to put token of, a copy of the exiled card. It's a token. And where X is the converted mana cost of that card. So let's say if we have a card in our hand, let's say like Spine of Ishha, for example, it costs 7 mana. We imprint it with Prototype Portal, then we're gonna exile Spine of Ishha, and then after that, with Prototype Portal on the battlefield for 7 mana every single turn, we're gonna be able to put a token onto the battlefield. That's a copy of that card, which is of course ridiculous. So this is a super, super fun card in this deck that cares about artifacts. Up next is Whirler Rogue for 2 and 2 blue. It's a 2/2 human rogue artificer. When it enters the battlefield, we're going to get 2 colorless Thopter creature tokens with flying. And additionally, we can tap 2 untapped artifacts you control so that target creature can't be blocked this turn. So essentially what it has, it's already 4 power and toughness on the battlefield for 4 right there, and it comes in with enough artifacts so that you will be able to guarantee that you can make any one of your creatures unblockable. And of course we can have some really big fatties, which we're going to look at later, which we'd love to be unblockable, so that is always handy. However, the question is, do we want, is there something better that we want to be doing? Yes. So it would be fine. You could leave this card in, but we do have an upgrade suggestion for you if you like. And the upgrade suggestion is the Antiquities War for 3 and a blue. So for 4 mana, it's a saga. So this is an enchantment that comes in, and after your draw, we're going to put a lore counter on it every single time. And then we're going to sacrifice it after the 3rd lore counter is placed on it. So what happens the first time that we put a lore counter on it? We're going to look at the top 5 cards of our library. Then we're going to reveal an artifact card from among them, put it into our hand, and then put the rest of the bottom of the library in any order. So 2 times we're going to be looking at the top 5 cards, grabbing an artifact, basically drawing an artifact 2 times in a row. And then the 3rd time, artifacts you control become artifact creature. Artifacts you control become artifact creatures with base and power toughness 5/5 till the end of the turn. So basically, all our regular artifacts, those 1/1 Thopters with flying, those regular artifacts that are not creatures, they're all going to become creatures. They're all going to become 5/5s, and then we can swing in with that. So this has a little bit more value than the Whirler Rogue. Thematic fits in fine though, but being able to draw 2 times an extra artifact and being able to swing in with 5/5s is nothing to sniff at. Up next is Mirrorworks for 5 mana. It's an artifact, and it states that whenever another non-token artifact enters the battlefield under your control, we may pay 2 mana, and then if we do, we're going to put a copy of that artifact onto the battlefield. A token, that's a copy. So this is exactly what this deck wants to be doing. This deck cares about artifacts. We got nice, sweet artifacts, and whenever we're going to be casting one from our hand, we're going to be able to make a copy as long as we pay an additional 2 mana. That's going to be super sweet. Then the last of the cards that make tokens, that's Echo Storm for 3 and 2 blues. This is another unique Commander 2018 product card. It's a sorcery, and it states that whenever you cast a spell, copy it. For each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game, you may choose new targets for the copy. And the states create a token that's a copy of target artifact. So, yes, it's nice to create copies of artifacts. However, for 5 mana, being able to get 1, maybe 2, might not be enough. So, we're actually going to be upgrading this card to Padeem, Consul of Innovation. It costs 4 mana. I'm sorry, for 3 and a blue. So for 4 mana, it is a 1/4 legendary Vidalcan Artificer. It states that artifacts you control have hexproof. Now this is huge. It's very nice to be able to protect your artifacts, and hexproof gives it to all our artifacts. So it essentially means that people are going to have to use some sort of board wipe or first get rid of Padeem, Consul of Innovation before they can start hitting our artifacts with removal. It also states that at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control an artifact with the highest converted mana cost or tied for the highest converted mana cost, we're going to draw a card. We're artifact heavy. Good chance that this will be the case. So then every turn we're also drawing a card. Yes, Echo Storm is flavorful. It's a fine card to leave in there. However, we believe that having Padeem, Consul of Innovation in there will create much more value for you. Moving on to sorry, it wasn't the last of the tokens. We're going to move on to another card which creates tokens. Mavrick, Thopterist for 3, a blue, and a red. So for 5 mana, it's a 2/2 human artificer. It's got improvise, which means we can use our artifacts to pay for the cost. So if we have 3 artifacts, we could tap those 3 and only pay a blue and a red. It also states that whenever it enters the battlefield, we're going to create 2 1/1 colorless Thopter creature tokens with flying. Now, this is a card I think it's okay, you could cheat it in for cheaper, but all you're really getting is the same that we were arguably getting from the Whirler Rogue. So we're actually going to be replacing this one. And the upgrade card that we have selected is Mizzium Transreliquat. For 3 mana, it's an artifact, and it's got an ability that for 3 mana, we can have this card become a copy of target artifact until the end of turn. Now, this is not only our artifact, this could be any artifact on the table. Whatever is the best artifact for 3 mana, this artifact has become a copy of that artifact, which is super nice. Additionally, we could pay 1 a blue and a red, so actually the same cost, but then specifically we need to require those colors, and it does exactly the same, except now it retains this ability, which means that we actually still have the flexibility to be able to switch it halfway through the turn or switch through multiple artifacts. Gives us that flexibility if we have extra mana. So yeah, if we only have 3 mana left over, you could just, or you don't have the combination of colors, then you can just use the first ability, but that will always last till the end of turn, whereas the second ability will give us that flexibility to switch around, which is pretty cool. Saheeli's Ancestry is next for 4 and 2 blue, so for 6 mana, it's a sorcery, and we're going to choose one or both, probably both. It says we're going to create a token that's a copy of target artifact. Okay, so we've seen this before, just like with Echo Storm. It's nice to make a copy of one of our good artifacts. But let me see. The second one is create a token that's a copy of target creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So this gives us a little bit more flexibility. Not only is it limited to just artifacts, but should there be something really chunky, something really nice that somebody has on the battlefield, a very powerful creature, we're able to not only take that creature, but now it's also an artifact, so it counts towards our artifact count, which this deck cares about. Thopter Assembly for 6 mana. It is a 5/5. With flying, and additionally it says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control no Thopters other than Thopter Assembly, we're going to return this card to our hand and create 5 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. Now, kind of unlikely that we will be returning it, considering we have so many ways of creating Thopters in this deck. There's a good chance that by turn 6 that we cast this, we already have a Thopter, but should we not, it is actually quite nice, because then we're going to be able to get those 5 1/1s. And the next turn we can cast it again, and we have that 5/5 big chunky flyer as well, which gives us tons and tons of creatures. Next up, Sharding Sphinx for 4 and 2 blue. It's a 4/4 artifact creature token Sphinx with flying, and it states that whenever an artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, we may put a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature token with flying onto the battlefield. Now, so it's already an artifact by itself, which is nice. This creature's got evasion, the flying, as we saw already, Thopter Assembly's 5/5 flyer. Very nice. This is a 4/4 flyer, also quite decent, and it makes sure that all our smaller artifacts, whenever they're attacking, we're going to be creating more Thopters, which is going to create more Thopters. So that's really nice. This is like basically an army creation unit on a stick. And then we come to a card much discussed, and that is Bruticlad Telcor Engineer. For 4, a blue and a red. So for 6 mana, it is a 4/4 legendary artifact creature Artificer. It states that creature tokens you control have haste, so now it's not so much focused on the artifacts, but now it's giving us all the tokens, regardless of whether it's a creature token, it's going to give them haste. And it states at the beginning of combat on your turn, we're going to create a 2/1 blue Myr artifact creature token, and then we may choose a token under our control. So it doesn't matter if it's an artifact or not, just choose a token under our control. And then if you do, each other token you control becomes a copy of that token. Now, we got plenty of ways to make tokens out of artifacts, and we have plenty of creatures that are artifacts, which means that there's a very good chance that we should be able to have, when this card's on the battlefield, a nice chunky creature token, which also happens to be an artifact, that we can have the 2/1 blue Myr become a copy of. And of course, later turns, we're going to have more and more of those, creating a huge army of very powerful creatures, like for example Sharding Sphinxes that we just saw. Very nice card, great inclusion in this deck. And the last of the cards that create tokens is Myr Battlesphere. For 7 mana, it is a 4/7 artifact creature. This is one of those cards that create tokens, but it's also kind of a fatty. When it enters the battlefield, we're going to create 4 1/1 colorless Myr artifact creature tokens. And additionally, whenever this guy attacks, we may tap any number of untapped Myr, and then this guy's going to get +X+0 equal to the number of Myr we tap. Plus, we're also going to deal X damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking, where X is the number of Myr we have. So essentially, pretty much guaranteed when it comes in, we got the 4. So it's going to attack as an 8/7 and additionally deal another 4 damage directly to our opponent's dome. So that is very powerful, nice way to create tokens, and of course, great card to make copies of, to make even more of those Myr tokens, which can again tap to make it even bigger and deal more indirect damage while attacking. Very, awesome card. Then we move on to the fatties. The first card is Psychosis Crawler for 5 mana. It's an XX artifact creature horror. When its power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in your hand. This deck is not really focused that much on cards in your hand, so it could be a lot, could be little. And it also states that whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. It's a fine card, it's an artifact, it works fine in this deck. However, we thought we could upgrade this card with a better card. And what's also important to remember is, which I didn't mention at the beginning of the video, is that even though we replace cards with upgrade cards, it doesn't mean that they're one-to-one strict upgrades. They're not, we didn't select the upgrade cards as a better version of the card that's already in the deck. We simply looked at cards that weren't pulling their weight that much in the deck, took those out, and then we just replaced them with cards that we thought would pull their weight, regardless of in which category we're in right now. So this is a great example of that. So Psychosis Crawler out, and we're going to put in Scrap Mastery for 3 and 2 red. So for 5 mana, it's a sorcery. And it states that each player exiles all artifact cards from his or her graveyard, then sacrifices all artifacts he or she controls, then puts all the cards he or she exiled this way onto the battlefield. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to take all the cards from our graveyard, then we're going to sacrifice all the artifacts from our graveyard. We're going to sacrifice all the artifacts on the battlefield. Those go into the graveyard, and we're going to take everything that was in the graveyard. We're going to put that on the battlefield. So that is really nice later on in the game to get back all our artifacts that have been removed or sacrificed during the duration of the game. Next up, Darksteel Juggernaut for 5 mana. It's an XX artifact creature Juggernaut. Its power and toughness equal to the number of artifacts you control. Okay, see, now this is a little bit more relevant because we are trying to create a large base, and we will have a lot of artifacts. So it's a little bit more relevant than the number of cards in our hand. Additionally, Darksteel Juggernaut is indestructible and attacks each turn if able. Okay, we don't really like the idea that it has to do anything, but the fact that it's indestructible basically means that we will have no problems in sending it towards our opponents at any given point in time, and it's just, that's indestructible and it's going to be big, so what's not to love about a fatty. And then the last of the fatties, it's not the last of the fatties, Scuttling Doom Engine for 6. It is a 6/6 artifact creature token, construct, sorry. It can't be blocked by creatures power 2 or less. So that's nice. It can't be chump blocked. So it's kind of, you want that in a fatty. And additionally, when it dies, it deals 6 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. As far as it's concerned, it's a fine card in the deck as well, relatively solid. It's fun to attack with, nice to make copies of. However, We did decide to take this one out to upgrade, and the upgrade card is Kuldotha Forgemaster. For 5 mana, it's a 3/5 artifact creature construct, and it states that we can tap it and sacrifice 3 artifacts to search our library for an artifact card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle our library. Now, this is extremely strong. I mean, nothing against Scuttling Doom Engine. It's a fine card, and it fits flavorfully well in the deck. But this upgrade cards allows us to turn those 1/1 Thopters that we're spamming, turn them into actually cheating out whole artifacts from our library onto the battlefield, and that is simply much too powerful. So we're definitely going to recommend that you add that card. Next card, Hellkite Igniter for 5 and 2 red. So for 7 mana, it's a 5/5 flyer with haste, this dragon. And for 1 and a red, we can give it +X/+0 until the end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control. Once again, this is a fine card. You know, Wizards of the Coast did its homework with respect to the theme. It works well. We can do this multiple times, giving it multiple times +X/+0, and it will be able to close out games. So you could leave it in. However, we did decide that we could upgrade this card with a different card, and that the upgrade card is Daretti Scrap Savant for 3 and a red. It is a 3 loyalty planeswalker. Its +2 is discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. So that's nice little card filtering. Make sure that we get to the cards that we need, or look for lands or whatever we're looking for. Its -2 is sacrifice an artifact. If you do, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your battlefield. So we have artifacts that we want to sacrifice, so that's nice for that. And we also have small Thopters that we don't mind sacrificing, and then we're able to get the best thing from our graveyard back onto the battlefield. And its -10 is put an emblem with whenever an artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return that card to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. Essentially, if we ultimate this thing, it makes our board state impossible to remove anymore, especially with all these big artifact creatures, so that closes out the game super fast. So that would be our upgrade suggestion. And then the last of the fatties, and this is the last of the fatties, it is Inkwell Leviathan for 7 and 2 blue. So for 9 mana, very expensive, but of course we have ways of reducing costs of artifacts in this deck, so it should we should be able to cast it no problem. It is a 7/11 Leviathan with Island Walk, Trample, and Shroud. Okay, so we can't enchant it with anything, we can't cast anything on it, doesn't matter. Our opponents can't use targeted removal against it. They will not be able to use board wipes, which say -5/-5, or deal 5 or even 10 damage to all creatures. So much stuff does not get rid of Inkwell Leviathan. When it attacks, it's got trample, and should you attack somebody with an island, then it's unblockable. So this is a super powerful card. And of course, it also is an artifact, so it counts towards our artifact quota. That actually, that was not the last of the fatties. We have still one more fatty that snuck in here, and that is one that's an exclusive from this set, and that is Ancient Stone Idol for 10 mana. It is a 12/12 artifact creature golem with flash, so it's cool that you can cast this one as a surprise. It also costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature, so if our opponent attacks with a bunch of guys, if it attacks with 10 or more creatures, it's essentially for free, and as a surprise, we pop it onto the battlefield and have a surprise blocker that is a 12/12, so it's pretty much won't die to anything. And additionally, should it die, we're going to create a 6/12 colorless creature token artifact with trample. So this card also can close out games. First of all, it's nice as a removal because we play it as a surprise to block something they weren't expecting. So we kill something, and of course when it's attacking, it's got trample, so it makes it super hard for people to block it and not take any damage. So we're going to leave that one in there. That is it for the artifacts. Let's have a look at the removal. We divided the removal spells into 2 categories, targeted removal and board wipes. The first of the targeted removal spells is Scrabbling Claws for a single mana. It's an artifact that can tap to make target player remove a card in his or her graveyard from the game. And additionally, for 1 and sacrificing this card, we can remove target card in a graveyard from the game and then draw a card. So we can use this in a number of ways, either consistently every turn making sure that we're emptying our opponent's graveyards. We can also use it to just sack it and get rid of a specific card that somebody's targeting at that point in time, instant speed, to make sure that it cannot reanimate it. Or we can just use it to sacrifice it to itself, draw a card, and then maybe we can recur it again and then draw a card. So it's nice that it gives that flexibility depending on what you really want to be doing. So we're leaving this card in there against those graveyard strategies. Next up, Into the Roil for 1 and a blue. It's an instant that returns target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, but we can also pay an additional 1 and a blue. So for 4 mana total, then we're also going to be drawing a card. It's a fine card. It's okay. You could leave it in there. However, we do have a upgrade suggestion, and that is Spine of Ishsa for 7 mana. So it's a bit more expensive. It's an artifact though this time, and when it enters the battlefield, we're going to destroy target permanent. So this means anything, including lands, planeswalkers, creatures, enchantments, artifacts, you name it. This card can destroy it, unless of course it's indestructible. And it also states that whenever Spine of Ishsa is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return this card to its owner's hand. So this is an awesome card to recur every single time. We don't even need anything that does graveyard recursion. All we need is a sack outlet, something that sacrifices artifacts, and then every turn we're going to be able to destroy a new permanent. Next up, Chaos Warp for 2 and a red. It's an instant. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into his or her library, then reveals the top card of his or her library. If it's a permanent card, he or she puts it onto the battlefield. So this is actually very strong removal. Very nice against people with graveyard strategies. You want stuff to go into the graveyard. So this basically, it's almost kind of like Exile, because it's going to take it and shuffle it into the library. Remember that if we target our opponent's commander, they can choose to have it go to the command zone instead of having it shuffled into their library. Aether Gale is next. Aether Gale is next for 3 and 2 blue. So for 5 mana, it's a sorcery that allows us to return 6 target non-land permanents to their owner's hand. This is huge. Very strong card. It's kind of like a board wipe because 6 is so much. And of course, it's beautiful that it hits non-land permanents, so not just creatures, for example. So it hits anything you want. Next up, Duplicant for 6 mana. It is a 2/4 artifact creature shapeshifter. It is an artifact, which is nice. In addition, he's got Imprint, which means that when it enters the battlefield, we can exile target non-token creature. So basically, we can be killing a creature, exiling it, even better. And as long as the card exile with Duplicant is a creature card, it's going to have the power and toughness of that creature, basically, until and still a shapeshifter at the same time. Of course, if we're to flicker this thing, you know, or sacrifice it, bring it back, then we're gonna have to imprint it on a new creature, and it's gonna have a new power and toughness. But it's cool because we can make a big creature and we can get rid of a big creature. Then the last of the targeted spells, and that is Bosch Iron Golem for 8 mana. It's quite steep, but it does give us a 6/7 legendary artifact creature with trample, and additionally for 3 and a red, we can sacrifice an artifact and then deal damage equal to the sacrificed artifact's converted mana cost to target creature players. This is a nice repeatable targeted removal, which this deck really wants to have. We can turn those artifacts into damage pretty much. So this together with Spine of Ishsa is unbelievable, because of course every time it comes in the spine, we're going to destroy a permanent, and then for 4 we could sacrifice the spine to deal 7 damage to target creature, and then it goes back to our hand, and then for 7 we would be able to recast again. So just those two together, you got everything you want to do with all your mana. So that's lovely. Then we move on to the board wipes. First card is Magma Quake for X and 2 red. It's an instant. It's important because usually our board wipes are sorcery speed. It's going to deal X damage to each creature without flying and each planeswalker. So yeah, it's nice. You pump some mana in there, you just kill whatever you want, as long as it doesn't have flying. Steele Hellkite for 6 mana. It is a 5/5 artifact dragon with flying. This is an awesome card seen in many decks. So it's nice that they reprinted it over here. For 2 mana, it's going to get +1/+0 until the end of turn. That's fine, but most importantly, we can pay X and then destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X whose controller was dealt damage this turn by Steele Hellkite. We can only use this 1 time per turn. So what makes this a board wipe? So basically, we can attack an opponent as long as this flyer gets through, deals damage, and we pay, for example, 3 mana. Then we're going to get rid of all their non-land permanents converted mana cost 3. So that could be, for example, all their mana rocks if we choose 2 or 3 or. But what's also cool to see is that when we attack an opponent with lots of tokens, we can pay 0 mana, and then it will destroy all their tokens, because tokens have converted mana cost 0. So this is awesome against those token players. Then we have the last of the board wipes, and that is Blasphemous Act for 8 and a red. So for 9 mana, it's a sorcery. It's going to deal 13 damage to each creature, but we usually won't be paying that because it costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield. So most often when you really need to play this, when you're really in trouble, you're probably just going to be paying a single red. This is an awesome card, awesome removal. Very happy to see this reprinted as well, and you should probably leave it in the deck. that is it for the removal cards. Let's have a look at the advantage cards. We divided the advantage cards into utility cards and cards that draw. The first of the utility cards is Enchanter's Bane for 1 and a red. It's an enchantment that states at the beginning of your end step, target enchantment deals damage equal to its converted mana cost to its controller unless that player sacrifices it. We see why Wizards of the Coast put it in there. It's fun against the enchantments deck. You know, you got a very expensive enchantment, I'm going to deal damage to you every time for that. However, when you look at it, unless you're playing against an enchantment-heavy deck, there are chances that you'll play this, and this will be the only enchantment on the battlefield, and you're going to be dealing 2 damage to yourself every turn. So this is a perfect card to upgrade. We decided to replace it with Mechanized Production for 2 and 2 blue, so for 4 mana. It's an aura. We're going to be enchanting an artifact we control. At the beginning of your upkeep, we're going to create a token that's a copy of enchanted artifact. Then, if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as the other, you will win the game. Okay, well, that second part's kind of boring, but what is cool is that if we put this on any one of our artifacts, we're going to get a token of that as a copy every single turn, and that, of course, is going to be huge, winning us the game very soon. And, of course, otherwise, in 8 turns, we won the game anyway, because we'll have 8 copies of the same thing. Up next, Swiftfoot Boots for 2 mana. It's an equipment, and equip cost 1. A creature has hexproof and haste. Fine, solid card. Our commander doesn't really need it for protection, but it's nice to be able to give our biggest fatty protection and haste. Tana's Ursa's Apprentice for a blue and a red. It's a 1/3 legendary human artificer. It's got haste. And additionally, we can pay a blue, a red, and tap it to copy target artifact, activated or triggered ability from an artifact source. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this is really cool because we, of course, have plenty of artifacts that come in and then say, you know, when this artifact enters the battlefield, do this. Now, bam. Then for 2 mana and tapping, we're going to get 2 of those triggers. But also we have activated abilities, which we can copy. So it's a very versatile card, and the cost just 2 mana and tapping it is very low. And of course, I like that if you would have 4 mana, you could pop this thing onto the battlefield and use its ability straight away, which is nice. Varchild, Betrayer of Keljor for 2 and a red. So for 3 mana, it's a 3/3 human knight. It states that whenever this guy deals combat damage to a player, that player creates that many 1/1 red survivor creature tokens. So the opponent creates the tokens. And survivors your opponents control can't block, and they can't attack you or planeswalker you control. So you're basically giving them an army that they can use against anybody except for you. And when this card leaves the battlefield, gain control of all survivors. So should they kill it, then we're going to get all those guys. Well, it's a fun card. It's nice, exclusive. I don't see what this card is doing in this deck. It's got nothing to do with artifacts. They're not red survivor creature tokens that are also artifacts. It's got nothing to do with this, so we actually decided to remove the card. It would be fine in any other aggressive deck. We're going to take it out over here. I'm going to replace it with the upgrade Clock of Omens. For 4 mana, it's an artifact. We could tap 2 untapped artifacts we control to untap target artifacts. So this is such a nice little value engine. You know, we've got the little Thopters that are not doing anything. We're going to tap 2 of those. And of course, Clock of Omens is also an artifact itself, so it can tap itself as well. And then we're going to untap an artifact that we can, you know, tap to reuse its ability. So that's very nice. Chief of the Foundry is next for 3 mana. It is a 2/3 artifact creature. And it says that other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. So it's a nice little lord, nice little creature that makes all those 1/1 Thopters into 2/2 Thopters with flying, which is actually nothing to sniff at. That's actually quite strong, so that's a lovely card. And for 3 mana, I think it's very affordable. Then we have Unwinding Clock. For 4 mana, it's an artifact, and it says untap all artifacts you control during each other player's untap step. Now, this is insanity. I'm very happy that Wizards of the Coast included this card, because with all your mana rocks, all that ramp, it's going to give you so much more mana. Unfortunately, Wizards of the Coast did not include a card to give your cards, your artifacts flash, so you wouldn't be able to cast your creatures and stuff and your artifacts in other people's turns, but we, of course, have found a solution for that. We have to see for later on for an upgrade card, but Unwinding Clock is an absolutely ridiculous card in this deck. I love it. Next up, a Vedalken Humiliator for 3 and a blue. It's a 3/4 Vedalken Wizard with Metalcraft, which means that if we control 3 or more artifacts, Then whenever this guy attacks, creatures your opponents control lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 1 until the end of turn. So that basically neuters their entire battlefield. They will not have anything decent to block, but they won't be able to use their ability. So when this guy attacks, they're probably going to have to throw all their creatures in front of it because they need to get rid of it. But still, it's just incredibly powerful being able to shut down all this stuff. Maybe following up with the Magma Quake, you know, killing all their stuff. A lot of versatility, and we will have that Meadowcraft really soon. I think it's a great new card. Geode Golem for 5 mana is a 5/3 creature golem artifact with trample. So it's a nice little beater. Its toughness is a little bit low for wanting to attack with it with impunity. It also states that whenever this guy deals combat damage to a player, you may cast your commander from the command zone without paying its mana cost, but you still need to pay additional costs. So that includes commander attacks. So that's pretty decent, pretty cool, nice little card, nothing to sniff at. And next, and that is the last of the utility cards, and that is Soul of Phyrexia for 6 mana. It is a 6/6 artifact creature with trample. Very nice, aggressively costed. Additionally, for 5 mana, permanents you control gain indestructible until the end of turn. Okay, once you get this thing on the battlefield, you make sure you keep that 5 mana open against the board wipes, against the targeted removal, because this thing will keep your entire board, will keep your artifacts, will keep your creatures, will keep everything alive. Additionally, for 5 mana, we can exile this card from our graveyard to give permanents you control indestructible until the end of turn. So once we've got it on the battlefield, it's almost impossible to get rid of. Should, by some fluke, you leaving yourself open and it will die, or you sacrifice it yourself, and it does hit the graveyard later on in the game, you can, as a surprise, still use it one more time to protect your board. Awesome card. Very happy for this reprint. Then we go to the draw cards. First of the new draw cards is Endless Atlas for 2 mana. It's an artifact, and we can pay 2 mana and tap it to draw a card. We can activate this ability only if you control 3 or more lands with the same name. Now, yes, there's a good chance that we will have, for example, 3 islands or 3 mountains, because that's pretty much the only options we have. But I think we can get a lot more value out of another card that we're going to upgrade into, and that is Master Thopterist for 2 and a blue. It's a 1/4 legendary human artificer. It states that whenever you cast an artifact spell, we're going to create a 1/1 Thopter artifact creature token with flying. We're casting tons of artifacts, so we're going to be getting tons of little 1/1 Thopters. And additionally, for 1 and a blue, we can sacrifice 2 artifacts to draw a card. So all those superfluous artifacts that we don't need, we can turn those into draws. And additionally, what's great is we can do this repeatedly. So with Endless Atlas, we can only do it once per turn because it taps itself. Not so with Master Thopters. We can do it as many times as we want in a turn, as long as we've got mana and artifacts. And of course, it's a nice little sack outlet as well. We've got some artifacts that want to be sacrificed, so we can recur them back from the graveyard, and Master Thopters gives us that sack outlet. Up next, Loyal Drake for 2 and a blue. We got a 2/2 Flying Drake with Lieutenant, and it says at the beginning of your combat, if you control your commander, we're going to draw a card. Yeah, it's a nice little flyer, draws us a card every turn. It's fine. Thirst of Knowledge is next for 2 and a blue. It's an instant. We're going to draw 3 cards and discard 2 cards unless you discard an artifact card. So basically, it's going to draw us 3 cards for 3 instant speed. Quite nice. However, we are going, it's going to draw us 3, but we still have to discard 1 card. But we decided that this would be a perfect card to replace and upgrade with Whirl of Invention. For X and 3 blue, it's an instant as well. And this one's got Improvise, which means that we can actually tap all our artifacts to pay for the generic mana in the cost. So essentially, all we have to worry about is a 3 blue mana. And we're going to search our library for an artifact card with converted mana cost X or less and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle our library. So essentially, this thing not only tutors, but also cheats into play the best artifact that we have in our entire library, which is awesome. Then we have a Saheeli's Directive for X and 3 red. It's also got Improvise, so exactly the same as Whirl of Invention in terms of how easy it's going to be to cast. It's going to allow us to reveal the top X cards of our library. You may put any number of artifacts with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield, then put all cards revealed this way that weren't put into the battlefield into your graveyard. So when you play Saheeli's Directive, you're tapping all your artifacts, you're making sure you got the 3 red mana at least, and you're basically going to go through as much of your library as possible and putting every artifact you've got onto the battlefield, which is, of course, super, super powerful. Great card in this deck. Up next, Thopterist Spy Network for 2 and 2 blue. It's an enchantment. It states at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control an artifact, we're going to create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. So it's cool. It's going to be a little engine that's going to be giving us more and more more flyers every single turn, and their artifacts as well. And it also states whenever 1 or more artifact creature tokens deal combat damage to a player, we're going to draw a card. Well, we've got the flyers very early on in the game. We're going to be poking people, so as long as we poke somebody with something, it's going to be an artifact, we're going to be drawing a card every single turn, which is nice. Tidings up next for 3 and 2 blue. It's a sorcery. It's going to draw us 4 cards. Very simple. It's a fine card. There's nothing wrong with Tidings. However, we decided that there was another card that would give us a little bit more value, so we're going to upgrade it into Skullclamp. For a single mana, it is an artifact equipment, equip cost of 1. It states equipped creature gets +1/-1, and it also states that whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards. Now, this is absolutely insane with the Thopters, with the servos, with anything that is 1 toughness. We're going to be able to create so much value for a single mana every single time, equipping it onto this 1 toughness creature, killing it, drawing 2 cards, paying another mana, equipping it onto another creature, killing it, drawing another 2 cards. It is going to go absolutely insane. You know, there's nothing wrong with Tidings, but a Skullclamp is a vastly superior upgrade. Then we go to Reverse Engineer for 3 and 2 blue. It's a sorcery with Improvise. So once again, we use our artifacts to reduce the generic mana. And it's going to draw us 3 cards. So yeah, sure, it's also fine, you know, one time drawing 3 cards. However, I think with Commander, what we find very important, and you've probably noticed this as well, we'd like to have more consistent, maybe not so much drawing one go, but get that consistency out there, make sure that for the long run, we get much more value out of it. And that's why we decided to upgrade it with Joyrot Weatherlight Captain for 2, a blue and a red. So for 4 mana, we get a 3/3 Human Artificer. And whenever you cast a historic spell, we draw a card. And of course, artifacts are historic, legendary creatures, so legendary, also planeswalkers and creatures that are legendary. And sagas are also historic. So there's actually a ton of stuff in this deck that will draw us cards. And Joyrez is definitely going to be giving us so much value over the course of the game. Then we have the last of the draws, and that is Coveted Jewel for 6 mana. It's an artifact that when it enters the battlefield would draw 3 cards. Additionally, we can tap it to draw 3 mana, to give us 3 mana of any color. And whenever 1 or more creatures in opponent's control attack you and aren't blocked, that player draws 3 cards and gains control of Coveted Jewel and untaps it. So this is also the reason why I think it's so important that we have sacrifice outlets in this deck. We added some more because of stuff like this, because when this thing comes in, bam, 3 cards, very nice. We also got an additional 3 mana that we can use later on. It's going to give us a nice ramp. And whenever somebody attacks us and we think we're not going to be able to block them, they're going to get through, we should sacrifice Coveted Jewel so that nobody else gains control of it and nobody else draws those cards, because that's quite dangerous actually. So we're going to let it go into the graveyard and then use our recursion to get it back from the graveyard and then play it again. Then we move on to the ramp cards. One of the great advantages of this deck is that except if you're playing green, your ramp is usually coming mostly from artifacts, and this deck loves artifacts. So we're going to start with the first one, and that is Soul Ring. For a single mana, it's an artifact that taps and gives us 2 colorless mana. Absolutely ridiculous card, broken in every single format except for Commander. You might even say also broken here, but regardless, every single one of the decks has to have it, so it's in here and you shouldn't take it out. It's great. Next, Mind Stone for 2 mana. It's an artifact that taps for colorless, and we can pay a mana and tapping it and sacrificing it to draw a card. So it's cool. If we got a way to recur stuff, we can actually, you know, for single mana, draw a card every single time. Get it back from the graveyard, play it again, pay a mana, sack it, get a good draw. So it's quite cool. Is it Signet for 2 mana? We can pay a mana, tap it to give us a blue and a red. So it gives us mana ramp and mana fixing. Sometimes we need red, sometimes we need blue. Prism Lens comes in for 2 mana, also gives us a colorless mana, and we can pay a mana and tap it to give us a mana of any color. So this is a nice filter card actually, so it ramps us, but it can also filter us. We did, however, decide to see if we could upgrade this card, so we're taking this one out and we're putting in instead, this is a card we already alluded to before, and that is Shimmer Mirror. For 3 mana, it's a 2/2 artifact creature. It has flash. And additionally, artifact spells your artifact spells also have flash. So this is very nice. That means that whenever we're getting, being able to untap our artifacts in our opponent's turn, or leaving our mana open to cast our artifacts in our opponent's end step, so we have it as a surprise, or in our artifact creatures play them as a surprise when people are attacking us as surprise blockers. Shimmer Mirror allows us to do all of that. So it's a very nice card, and being able to give all our artifacts, artifact spells flash, including the creatures, is super powerful. Next up, Ethereum Sculptor for 1 and a blue. It's a 1/2 Vidalcan Artificer, and it's also an artifact creature, and it states that artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So it's a nice little discount for our artifacts. Unstable Obelisks costs 3 mana, taps for a colorless, but we can also pay 7 mana and tap it and sacrifice it to destroy target permanents. This is kind of like the Spine of Ishsa. We would need some graveyard recursion to get it back, play it again, and then sacrifice it, but it is pretty cool that it hits any permanent. Vessel of Endless Rest costs 3 mana and taps for 1 mana of any color. But when it enters the battlefield, we're going to put target card from our graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. So it also requires a target, otherwise we wouldn't even be able to play it. So that it's not a May ability. We have to do it to be able to play it. So that's kind of annoying. So we're actually going to be replacing this card. And we're going to be replacing this card with the upgrade card Grand Architect for 1 and 2 blue. It's a 1/3 Vidalcan Artificer. It's not an artifact itself. It says other blue creatures you control get +1/+1. Okay, it's not that big a deal. And it also allows us to turn a target artifact creature blue until the end of turn for a single blue. That's cool. And we can also tap and untap blue creature we control to give us 2 colorless mana. Sorry, yeah, 2 colorless mana, but we can only spend this mana to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. So what's nice about this is, of course, if we have a bunch of blue creatures, each one of those is going to give us 2 mana, and pretty much all our spells are artifacts, so it's going to give us great ramp. And of course, if we don't have the creatures that are blue, we can just use some blue to make them blue anyway. Worn Power Stone is next for 3 mana. It enters tapped, but it taps for 2 colorless mana. Magnifying Glass also costs 3. Taps for a single colorless mana, but we can pay 4 and tap it to investigate. So that means we're going to put a colorless clue artifact token onto the battlefield, which we can pay 2 mana and sacrifice to draw us a card. So that's nice. It gives us, we can either, if we want to have more artifacts, we can just use it just to create more clues, and then later when we have extra mana, we can just sacrifice them to draw us cards. Pilgrim's Eye also costs 3, is a 1/1 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, we're going to search our library for a basic land card and put it into our hand. So it kind of mana fixes us. Doesn't really mana ramp us, but it's a cool card to sacrifice and recur constantly. Treasure Nabber is a new card exclusive for this deck for 2 and a red. It's a 3/2 Goblin Rogue, and whenever an opponent taps an artifact for mana, we're going to gain control of that artifact until the end of our next turn. So that's cool. So as the table goes round, people are tapping their artifacts for mana. We're getting all of that, and then at the beginning of the turn, we're going to have tons of extra artifacts. And of course, what's extra fun is to use those artifacts for mana and then sacrificing them so that they go into our opponent's graveyards after we've used them. Then we have Command Sphere for 3 mana. We can tap it for 1 mana of our commander's color identity, so that's either red or blue, and we can also sacrifice it to draw cards. It's again a great card that we can consistently recur to get that extra draw. Hedron Archive costs 4, taps for 2 colorless, and we can sacrifice it and pay 2 mana to draw 2 cards. And then we move on to Blinkmoth Urn. It's an artifact at the beginning of each player's pre-combat main phase, so the first main phase. As long as this card is untapped, that player adds 1 colorless to his or her mana for each artifact he or she controls. So that's ridiculous. This is crazy ramp. We pop this down, we're going to have the most artifacts, we're going to get the most value out of it, and if we don't, then we can just use something like Unwinding Clock to tap Blinkmoth Urn at the end when we're done with it to make sure that other people don't get any value out of it. But even if they do, we're just still going to get so much more colorless mana out of it in our first main phase. Dreamstone Hedron is next for 6 mana. It's an artifact. It's also the last of our ramp cards. We can tap it for 3 colorless mana, and we can also pay 3 mana and tap it to sacrifice it to draw 3 cards. So it's a fine card. You could leave it in. It is a bit expensive, you know. We usually want your ramp cards to be a little bit cheaper so you can ramp into the big stuff. So you don't really need the big expensive ramp, because then what are you going to ramp into? So we decided to upgrade this card by taking it out and putting in Storm the Vault. Storm the Vault costs 2, a blue and a red. So for 4 mana, it's a legendary enchantment, and it states that whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, we're going to create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. So basically every turn, as long as we attack somebody, we're going to be getting one of those treasures every single turn. Then at the beginning of your end step, if you control 5 or more artifacts, which you're going to have pretty much instantly, this is the beginning of the end step, so this is important. So if you pop it down on the turn and we already have 5 artifacts, or if we had 4 and then we attack that turn and we get the 5th one, then already it's going to flip over, it's going to transform right away at the end of our turn, and it's going to turn into Vault of Catlacan, and it's a legendary land, and it can tap for 1 mana of any color, but it can also tap and give us a blue mana for each artifact you control. Now, this is insane. We're going to have lots of artifacts already set, so this is going to tap us for a ton of mana every single turn. That is super, super nice ramp. That is it for the ramp. Let's have a look at the lands. Wizards of the Coast has divided the lands into 15 islands, 12 mountains, and 11 non-basics. Now let's have a look at the non-basics real quick. We have Izzet Guildgate, which comes in tapped, but gives us either a blue or red, which is the same as Highland Lake, and which is the same as Swiftwater Cliffs, except this one also gives us a life when it comes in. Then we have some artifact lands in the form of Seat of the Synod. It's an artifact land that taps for a blue. We have the Great Furnace, which is an artifact land which taps for a red. And we have Dark Citadel, which is an artifact land which taps for a colorless, but this one is indestructible. Then we have Izzet Boiler Works, which comes in tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, we have to return a land we control back to our owner's hand. But it does give us a blue and a red when it taps. And we also have a Forge of Heroes, which is a new land exclusive to this deck. It taps for a colorless, and additionally, we can also tap it to give target commander that entered the battlefield this turn a +1/+1 counter on it if it's a creature, or a loyalty counter if it is a planeswalker. So of course we have a planeswalker, so that's nice to start off our Saheeli with an extra loyalty counter. Foundry of the Consuls taps for a colorless, but we can also pay 5 and sacrifice it to create 2 1/1 Thopter creature artifact tokens with flying. Buried Ruin is nice because it taps for a colorless, but we can also pay 2, tap it, and sacrifice it to return target artifact card from our graveyard back to our hand. That's a nice little recursion right there. And we have Command Tower. That is the last of our lands. This one taps to give us a mana of any color that's in our commander's color identity. So that is red or blue. So that is it for the lands. Let's have a look at the conclusion. So in conclusion, I think this deck probably has the most synergy out of the 4 pre-constructed decks. A lot of the cards very solid, you know, cares about artifacts, very clear, you know what you want to do. The deck plays well, it's gonna play very straightforward. It's got a lot of options, and I like the synergy with the artifacts. It's very thematic. However, I do recommend that you get the upgrades because they simply give you that extra boost that this deck really requires. For example, giving that flash, giving some extra sack outlets. These are the things that this kind of a deck really wants to have, and you know, they're out there and they're not expensive cards. After all of these upgrades were for under $25, so you can really go out and get these upgrade cards and improve your deck vastly. Also, we'd like to ask you to head on over to patreon.com/budgetmtgdecks, and we would ask if you would donate as little as $1 a month. It would really help out the show so we can make more videos and continue to increase the quality of the videos. And we would also like to thank our current patrons for making these videos possible. Thank you very much for that. Also join us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for the latest news with regard to the newest decks coming out, with non-budget upgrade suggestions. All that good stuff is there. We also just take pictures of when we're play testing and stuff like that. So head on over at budgetmtgdecks to see what we're working on. Also join us here and subscribe to the YouTube channel for the most powerful decks and advice everyone can afford. And of course, if you do, hit the little bell button to make sure you get notified when a new video comes out. Thanks for watching. I'm David. This was Budget MTG Decks.